Yeah, I did actually. What else? Thank you, everybody. Nice to hear everybody in good spirits, talking along tonight to our February meeting. And we have everybody here tonight, so that's excellent, thank you. Having viewed tonight's agenda, does any councillor wish to declare a pecuniary interest? Silence and taking the heads is a good thing. 4.0, confirmation of the minutes of the 17th of January 2023. Can I have a move? Thank you. Sorry, it's a bit of trouble. It's a good start.
Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, I was like, did you mean to say?
I went to go, I could feel the tickle happening and it wasn't coming out. The second, please. Any discussion on those minutes? No, I shall put that vote of acceptance. All those in favour? Passed unanimously, thank you. 5.0 was the mayor's report. Move for that, please. Councillor Reid, Councillor Gatehouse, I'll take, thank you. And invite any questions from the floor regarding our meetings and other activities.
How did your meeting with the Dudesbury Football Club go? I know you gave us a brief update, but anybody else?
Yes, it was excellent actually. To see the changes in the club change rooms that the club was able to do with the 60,000, 65 it might be, somewhere around there, grant that Minister Street was able to put together just before the end of the financial year with volunteer club labour as being quite enormous. We got a pretty good visit because they just painted all the coatings on the floor, so it wasn't a good place to stand there sniffing the fumes for very long, but they had taken that further than they planned and actually did the umpires change room as well, put that into separate cubicles. So it wasn't just for the two change rooms. And on On that night that I was down there meeting with the president, Dan Bryan, we were training on one end and the blokes down the other end, and they were finding their space. It was a little bit different for them how they were doing their exercise and that, but everybody seemed pretty happy about it all, and we're very pleased with the numbers of male and females that looked like participating this year, so it was very good. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, you had a waste strategy Zoom meeting. Would you be able to elaborate a bit more about that and if anything new in the pipelines you can share?
That's to do with the waste strategy, where it was just a bit of information along the lines of what was happening in that draft. So I'm going to say there's nothing new to report. It was just bringing people up to speed.
Okay, thank you.
Can you give us an update on the dog park issues?
Not anything from the last week, although we've had several inspections. The cracking with the soils down there is a major issue, but it's isolated to quite a small area of the overall park. In the past, we have done various methods of trying to prevent some of the cracking, and anybody that's lived in the Sorell municipality for some time knows it's almost impossible to stop. It's unusual that in a lot of the areas there doesn't seem to be the cracking, and in certain areas there is. It doesn't matter how much sand you tip down, it just keeps disappearing. They've tried water dumping, they've tried powering it back up and letting it resettle. It seems to be that more plantings can have a positive effect, but in some areas, depending on the trees now, unfortunately, it takes out, can be negative. So we've also had a lot of feedback from people that don't have an issue with the dog park as well. So it's as with all community issues, there's two sides to it. Cracks are an issue, but it may well be that we may have to run a bit of fencing around some of those areas when they do get bad, and or dump some major amounts of water just to let it soak up and hold up. And when you think about the amount of rain that we've had over the last couple of years, it hasn't been as bad as in previous years. It's not an easy answer, and several people have suggested that they just want a surface like footballers and cricketers and have a little athletic play on, but to go to that level of cost, and when you point out what those clubs pay for the hire of the ground and everything like that, and you know we've just got into it, I'm not sure where it sits, but I think it's a subject that this council and us as councillors will have to address shortly on where is the best position for the dog exercise area, and then how we set up properly. If you're going to spend the money to put some irrigation in, obviously the irrigation's got to be in the early hours of the morning when the use is minimal, otherwise you're creating other mud issues. But is there a better location for it? What do you actually want in there? Because they're not exercise parks as in jumps and things like that. They're more suited to letting the dogs run. What creature comes to put in there is all things that we're going to have to address at a workshop pretty shortly, I'd say.
Thank you. The meeting with Brighton Mayor Lee Gray, was that perhaps something to do with bypass discussions as reported in the local media?
No, I'd like to say it was, but no, it was more about what we saw in the paper where he expects to be a candidate for the presidency of the Local Government Association. Briefly touched on the bypass idea, which is something that our local member John Tucker had been pushing with us for several years, and then now has it on that the government will look at that in their strategy for coming years. But, there is a certain sense of quietness about it. And when you look at yesterday, the General Manager and I were in an STCA strategic planning day, and transport and how you change the way all our regional centres feed into Hobart. It's obviously to Lee and I and Clarence a sensible suggestion for assisting in taking some of that traffic issue away, the bottleneck out of Hobart. So I'm sure it will be discussed more, but it wasn't a major part of the conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Now, when you talk to the ABC, what did you tell them about water and sanitation? Because a lot of people have run you since then. I said I agree with them now.
Yes, there wasn't a lot to it other than it had been looked at, and it wasn't quite as easy as had been suggested to Leon. And he realised from the principal of the school, Matt Kenny's comments off air also, that there was other issues there. Since talking and explaining some of the issues to Leon, I've had several conversations with him. He's producer. He'd like to make it a subject for future stories. And Russell's been good enough to offer some knowledge on the subject back to Leon so that he had a proper picture of the facts behind it all and the timeline, the cost and everything like that. But there was also people in the background saying to him, we don't want water and sewage, we're happy with what we had. So he realised that the subject was a little bit bigger than just saying we want sewage and water.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's no other questions. I shall put my report for acceptance. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you. No supplementary items this evening. And council workshops are listed there. 9.1, we have a motion on notice from Councillor Trenius. Thank you. Would you like to
I'll
move?
move.
Thank you.
I'll
Yes,
move.
thank you. And Councillor Reid has seconded. And pass over to Councillor Trenius if you'd like to make comment on it.
I hate speaking to these, but I hope you can hear me. Look, I didn't put a lot in the report because I thought it would be there for discussion when the councillors have their workshop, and nor did I outline any of the communities that should be included in the local area plan. I mean, there are a number of communities that we call, all of them are included in the southern beaches. I've just written down a few things, and as I said, once we discuss at the workshop, the scope of the area plan could be certainly discussed, and some of the issues, and one of them, obviously, that you just mentioned there, is water and sewerage. The beaches, the waterways, of course, parks and open spaces, and just maintaining the character of the southern beaches. It certainly has an identity already and a real community feel. I've been down there for 50 years, so I've seen a lot of changes, and I know a lot of the community and how they feel about the area. So I'm just hoping, at a workshop that we can discuss the scope, and I would, as I've said in the report, like hopefully we can put some money towards the community consultation. It'll be an opportunity for us to engage with the community at a pretty good high level, I would say, and it could bring us a bit of kudos. Let's hope. So that's if it gets up tonight.
Yes, I'll be surprised if it didn't get up. The management team have been looking at that as the next step probably for the last couple of years in conversation and including discussions with some of the major landowners down there about what they actually want to do with their land and not just fit as many houses on this hospital, whether it needs to be industrial. And I've certainly been around long enough for when you suggested that Miss Reardon's land should be purchased by the Education Department for a new school on that corner, which is now proving to be probably a astute comment. But it's something that the General Manager has looked at some of the areas down there in the southern beaches for some time. It would be a very appropriate step at this stage.
I think if we do it properly, Mayor, engage different groups and invite different groups to discussions, but as you said, that piece of land would also make a good site for a new shopping complex, because I believe our community has outgrown the existing shopping complex. That might be a bit contentious, but I'll set it anyway, so, thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Commend councillor Tweemers for putting the motion, and it's something that we've discussed at council in recent years, and I've raised fairly often as an opportunity in terms of the strategic planning, strategic land use planning, and engaging the community, as councillor Tweemers said. So I'm very encouraged to see this and looking forward to that further discussion. As we know from the local government review research that we've all been looking closely at lately, the importance of local consultation and engagement has come to the fore, and that confirms that that's exactly the right path for us to take. So this has my full support.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, I shall put the motion for acceptance. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. No ifs now, Councillor Tweemers, it's through.
So,
No ifs, if it's going to get through, it is through.
thank you.
Well done.
Thanks, everyone.
Well done.
10.1, work group reports, and no movement for that, thank you. Councillor Campbell, Councillor Reynolds, thank you. And a few new names on the list of the reports now, just take note, and open the floor up for discussion or questions, thank you.
I know it's
Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mayor. Robert, you had a meeting with Mona to discuss the BMX track. Was that for extra funding, and how did them conversations go?
Yeah, through Mayor, it was for just gauge Mona's level of generosity to our plight. I think they've been asked for money for lots of things for lots of years, so they're fairly cool to deal with. They're good to deal with, very professional, but bottom line is their offer was more in a project management support sense, and also if we wanted to have access to the materials that they have to remove at that site, that they would provide them to us at no charge, basically dirt and other bits and pieces that could be reused. So it wasn't a complete failure. It didn't quite get the results after, but it was still worthwhile.
Okay. Anything worth salvaging apart from the dirt?
Yeah, the starting mechanism is worth a lot of money, and that's coming over to get reused. And they have some lighting that we could probably use in part. It's not enough for the complex, but that would more likely be stored until we have funding to do the lighting properly, because we don't at this stage.
And could I also ask about your meeting with the Department of Education, Children and Young People around the Dodgers Ferry Primary School Hall?
That was probably yes, I'd say.
Sorry.
So yes, we've been liaising with the Department of Education and Young People in relation to the use of the kiosks so that the canteen can expand their Healthy Lunches program. They need to increase their utilisation of what they currently have in the deed arrangement.
Yeah. Any discussion about possibly transferring or selling that asset off to the department?
No.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Oh, yeah, I just wondered about the Ingham's consultation. That is commercial land, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean that's a larger site than you'd expect from just driving past it. It's we're particularly interested in getting better use of what's currently vacant land, because they rely on to be able to dispose of their treated wastewater. So Ingham's, we're fortunate enough to get some significant funding at the last federal election to help upgrade the site processes. However, it is very much dependent on Tas Water being part of the solution, and That's taken some time to get resolved.
If they came to the party, would that mean there would be further land available for other commercial uses?
Yeah, that, our view has been, since I've been at the council now, that the site would lend itself to what we desperately need here, which is some employment generating land use, so sort of service industrial, light industrial, because you'd be unable to get residential land on there by virtue of or residential use by virtue of the buffers that the processing facility requires. So, a properly designed and constructed or master plan estate would be fantastic, but it's been a very, very slow process due to changes in ownership, principally with Inghams, but more recently it's been really positive as far as having the funding, but we just now to put the focus on Taswater and getting a resolution from them and timing with it, which is not as simple as what we'd like.
Yeah. The state plan, not putting words in your mouth, but do they prefer that we go elsewhere for commercial land?
Now, ironically, Department of State Growth is the transport asset owner, plus the Planning Commission much prefer to see the use of that site as an example for employment generating activity. So that actually, in theory, they would both support it. Probably less so if it was residential, but certainly the discussion we've had over nearly 10 years now, they've both said if you can provide that type of land use within Sorell, it's a really good outcome.
I'd say ask that because I have a panel beater connection who is going to have to leave here because he can't get 100 square metres extra to grow his business. So he ends up going across the causeway.
Yeah, the council had some strategic work done over 10 years ago, which indicated at that point there were many hectares behind the supply of industrial land. So we have zero.
Could I just make a comment or ask a question, General Manager? Why do we insist on putting light industrial in areas where there's views and near waterways? I'm just sort of a little bit miffed by that. We've made that mistake so many times. I just prefer something more aesthetic in that particular area as you're coming into Sorell. That's my opinion.
Well, we haven't made decisions as council, but certainly there are examples of really high quality estates of that type that have been built elsewhere on the mainland, and they're properly planned out and conditioned. And also, as I said, we don't think you'll be able to get any residential use there because of the buffer areas required for the processing aspect. So it would be very much dependent on the manner in which we dealt with the master planning side and mandated how it's done to get that result. Otherwise, you're doing that with
the design is very important.
Oh yes,
It's going to be acceptable.
We would like to build in open space link all the way around the foreshore as well, but we're a long way from that point because until Taswater can provide commitments to the works they are required to do or the funding that's required to upgrade their component of the sewage infrastructure, then little progress will be made. And we've had little progress for 10 years.
One step forward, two sideways, and a couple backwards. Not even a lapse at the moment. Any other questions or comments, please?
Just a couple. Page 14, customer requests and the environmental requests. I take it, Greg, that their wastewater, noise and all that sort of queries. It outweighs all the other departments.
Yeah, Mayor, if I may answer that question. I haven't got the agenda in front of me, but I think that probably there hasn't been compared to most months, not too much out of the norm. I mean, we do traditionally, certainly through that wet period, the incidence of complaints that we were receiving regarding wastewater and stormwater was pretty high. We've still got a few legacy complaints such as that, but it hasn't been anything too much out of the norm.
It certainly outweighs all the other department requests. Page 14.
Yeah, I suppose health and compliance, they suggest we do tend to get a lot of that work.
Thank you. The other one there is the train shed and the work that's progressing there. Some of us were of the understanding we didn't have any funds to do any landscaping, but I noticed in the report trees and bollards and there's been money for those. At a meeting, the Historic Society, we were at, Melinda and myself, or Councillor Reid and myself, last week. They suggested that some groups might like to put some funds, and I think the society still wants to do an information board. They'd like to, and I know of some groups who would probably put some funds towards landscaping. Is that desirable? I mean, would you still like to see some funds?
Through the Mayor, absolutely. Well,
That's what I thought.
we've completely expended the grant funding that we had.
And a little bit more.
And a bit more, thanks Russell. So we're unable to do any further work. So once they've finished the doors, that's largely it. So any funding would be great. The next step is the statutory process of based on how it is, what uses can it accommodate without further expenditure. So that's going to be the limiting factor, but we're seeking advice from our building surveyor about that. Even in the sense of sort of temporary, one-off type events. We'll see where we go, but we're otherwise in budget.
That's the next hurdle.
Yes.
Well, I was pleased to see that there was some money for trees there anyway, and, but we'll go back to those other groups and see if they're hand in their pockets.
We're happy to take it.
Good.
There's nothing else, so I shall put the motion for acceptance of the reports to everybody. All those in favour? Unanimously. We have no petitions before us at this stage. 12.0 is land use planning. Mayor advised in accordance with the provisions of Part 2, Regulation 25 of Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulation 2015. The intention of the Council to act as a planning authority pursuant to the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993 is to be noted. In accordance with Regulation 25, the Council will act as a planning authority in respect to those matters appearing under item 12 on this agenda, inclusive of any supplementary item. 12.1 is the Sorell Planning Authority minutes. May I have a mover for this, please? Thank you, Councillor Russell and Councillor Campbell, thank you. Any discussion on those minutes from start? I shall put the motion for acceptance. All those in favour? Thank you, passed unanimously. .1 is there is a amended copy with some changes that were requested on 13.1. They're in front of you. So I can move and second for the for this item, please. Councillor Campbell and Councillor Rose. And open the floor for any discussion.
Mayor,
Yes.
thank you. I do have a question. We discussed in a workshop and was proposed that an environment committee or working group was to be created. And Councillor Reid and myself, we put our hand up to participate in it. I couldn't see it in this list. This is something we'll be discussing after.
Yeah, through Mayor. So that we're in the process of forming up some structure to that and some bones to it, so that certainly will be back before council. It wasn't part of this because we had nothing to, we had no content for it at this stage, so it hasn't been missed, it just hasn't yet been prepared.
Thank you.
Councillor Campbell.
Through the Mayor, at our same workshop, we talked about, I think it was the town teams. Where could we look at maybe starting something like that so that we can help more with the community and what they're wanting in their local areas?
Yeah, so that's in the same boat, Councillor Campbell, so we've still got to work out just how that would look and function, so that's effectively the second one in the red that's to be confirmed on that revised table. So the one that hasn't been put in there at all is the one that Councillor Miracasada mentioned around the environment group or committee. So we're in the process of doing those.
Still a hard process to go through there through workshops and how they're going to work in terms of reference and how you actually get a balance of people on those groups. So they just don't become one-dimensional. And also when you start to go out to the community like that, we have our present system that most of the new councils have experienced yet of community consultation. You have to weigh up which way you're going to go with that consultation, otherwise you can spend a lot of time with a lot of money with a lot of staff out having those events without the purpose of having a direction attached to them. So I think in one of the reports, Jess mentions that doing a bit of framework around that at the moment, so they'll come back to a workshop first before it comes to council.
I just through the Mayor, as the Arts and Cultural Committee, we have a reference group, and I'll suggest, are we looking at changing the terms and conditions of the Arts and Cultural?
We have a meeting of the reference committee tomorrow,
yes.
and that was planned to be discussed with that committee
Right.
about broadening the scope of their objectives.
And, right, well, no, I was just thinking it doesn't involve another group of councillors aside, or are we looking at that?
It's probably quite similar to the environmental group that we're speaking about. We need to do a bit more work around what.
Okay, thank you.
Through the Mayor.
Councillor Reid.
Further to that, I'd just like to note the way, and I've raised this before, the way the table's presented looks like we have had an active Arts and Culture Section 24 committee, but it's my understanding that hasn't actually met in that format since something like 2015. And so in more recent times, although we were nominated 4 years ago, that hasn't been active, and it's good to have had the reference group formed for the Culture Centre. And it'll be even better to review the whole thing and see what's the most appropriate and perhaps more strategic approach going forward. Similarly there's another one in the same boat, the Waste Authority, which has been through a long and convoluted series of changes over the last 4 to 5 years. So I just want to note that too, that it hasn't been active in that format since 2018. But it's good that it's settled down now into the authority and the much more effective approach, hopefully, that will bring us.
I'm sure whether it's settled yet.
No, but it's getting there, it's getting there.
It's getting there, yes.
More of a statewide approach with regional representation through the authority. So.
Thank you. There's no other comments on right. Councillor representatives on committees. motion, I shall put that to acceptance. All those in favour? Passed unanimously, thank you. 15.1 is community grants program. I will move to this motion to discuss. Councillor Reynolds, thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Campbell, thank you. Floor for discussion on the Carlton Park Surf Life Saving Club's grant application. Councillor Gaines.
Do we know if there was any communication back from the Surf Club as in the return of quotes for the barbecues they wanted to purchase, or any further communication after we asked questions of them?
Yes, they were asked to provide a quote, but to my knowledge, it wasn't received by council.
Thank you.
Councillor Miranda Casado.
Thank you. So should we wait until we get the information that we asked to assess this grant? How do you usually deal with something like that?
Normally we work off the application that's available. If we wish to seek more information, we do. This was just on the cost of the barbecue. You may remember from our workshop discussion, there were fors and against the whole proposal. The quoting of it was only part of that. But, it can always come back as another quote, but I guess we haven't received anything, so it's before us at the moment for discussion. It can always go around again, or we request it again, or something different if we choose to support or not support tonight. Deputy Mayor.
For the mayor, can the mayor remember how much money the state government gave to the surf club recently? Is it $1.5 million or 1.2?
It was about 1.2, but it's been in several parts of the club expansion. They have a excellent, one of the best I've seen from a sporting organisation, multi-stage complex development, which they have stuck to, and the state and federal authorities have been very supportive of mammoth changes to that facility, both in their facilities underneath, their boat storage, as well as their ability for an upstairs function centre and bar to be able to support the continued growth of that club. So
1.2 million to extend to
that was the last
barbecue.
Yes.
Could we wait for further information on the proposal?
We can lay it on the table.
Because you
Yeah,
can
where would you see that,
get barbecue for less than that.
Well, yes, the points about barbecue, yes. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe at the workshop, we didn't resolve to approve this grant. Yeah, but it's got there in the recommendation that
I thought that.
Want
the
more
council resolves
information?
to approve the Carlton Park Surf.
Well, that's up to us. At the end of it, it also says the application is now presented to council for determination. That's part of it. I personally do have an issue with the request for $1,000. It's probably, when you think of what the club's done over a number of years and the amount of money there and their ability to raise their own funds and the amount of sponsors they have in the club, I thought it was probably money that could have, there's a lot more needy things than now a barbecue on top of all the money that's been spent on those premises. So I'm hesitant. $1,000 is a lot amongst our budget and everything like that, but it is to me with some of the organisations that probably need it more so than have got the ability to raise the money that the surf club has. So my opinion is that I do not feel strongly enough about this to support this application. Councillor Murray,
Thank you, Mayor. I do want to comment on Councillor Reynolds. I think it's important that we think about the process that we're following. So I agree with you that we didn't get the information we requested, and still it came to us without what we requested. So I would like to see a stronger process and a more defined process on how we, and that's something we could discuss as well later on, how we organize a better process so that we can approve or not the community grants. And we can, I would like to propose we do that later in another workshop, but for now, I think we didn't get what we requested, and that's important to know.
The motion is before us. If you wish to lay it on the table, we need a move in a second to do that until we wait for that. Deputy Mayor Lee has proposed to lay it on the table. Is that correct? Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Gatehouse, thank you. In procedural, I'll put that motion. All those in favour of laying on the table? Thank you. Passed unanimously. On finance, 16.1 is the mid-year budget review. Move in second. Councillor Brown and Councillor Reid, thank you. And open the floor for discussion. It's a fair bit in this and a lot of work, because it's just before we come up to starting the process for the new budget period, but I guess the thing that I'm staggered by in amongst all this is how hard the staff in the key positions had to work. When you think about, we've been under an election period where funding has been held up from quite a few different sources. We've had an enormous inflation. We've seen cost of building and materials literally double, and still our work, there's plenty of ups and downs and all around there, but still our budget is extremely accurate to the numbers, and outside of a few major blowouts on big projects, the ups and downs have been amazingly close to what our budget actually really is. So, pass that congratulations on to the General Manager, I suppose, because it does show a sense of accuracy that's got past both our internal and external audit committees with a fair bit of ease compared with the turmoil of the financial markets at the moment. So, any other comments on the mid-year budget?
No, I agree with you, they've done a very good job.
It's always comprehensive.
Yes, nothing left unturned there that we could find. Thank you. I shall put that motion for acceptance. All those in favour? Thank you. Unanimously. So one like Groundhog Day, we now move to the executive summary for financial report for January 2023, 16.2. Can I have a mover for this, please? Councillor Campbell and Councillor Brown, thank you. And open the floor for further discussion. Yes, General Manager, with January, we normally always see a bit of invoice timing issues over the Christmas New Year period, and that doesn't appear to be any different here. There's a lag in some invoices coming through. Into February, we'll probably see that corrected.
Yeah, the biggest, we're tracking better than what we thought operationally, but the biggest impact to us is in the capital sense, with timing of grant money coming in and progress of the projects with it. So at the moment, our cash position's a bit, for want of a better term, fluid, because we're not going to know until the end of the financial year how far we've progressed some of those projects to utilise that cash. So it's reasonably inflated at the moment. It's the best summary I can provide.
Hearing comments yesterday from other mayors and different managers that are struggling to even get contractors and quite simple capital projects doubling in cost. The frustration has been borne right across all parts of the industry. Any other comment on the financial store, please?
Well, the Treasurer describes the period, federal Treasurer is probably one of the most difficult Australia's been through since the war. And we looked at councils like Tenterfield in New South Wales, where they doubled the rates, quadrupled them. So how much are we aware of a danger that we might get into a state like that? I mean, that's partly, I suppose, why we're all thinking about being careful about who we give money to. I know small amounts of money aren't a lot, but a lot of small amounts of money are.
Yes, you'll find over the next couple of months that our rate strategy and how we work that to a block of money that we're able to deliver the services that we can to the community in a sensible way, whether it's CapEx, whether it's maintenance, or whether it's community services, will take shape pretty quickly over the next 2 to 3 months in our budget review. We'll have plenty of workshops to discuss some of those points you've just raised.
And to signal to the community that we're being responsible with that money.
We're not there yet. Yes, Councillor.
Thank you. Part 14 of the report on grants capital says that that's below budget by $1.769 million. What, is that simply a timing thing, or is that, is there part of that is in question?
That was made up. I think there's an explanation there in 2 points, General. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And part of that was grants coming forward and
The timing in some of the bigger grants has been quite an issue. This hasn't been a problem for us, but it's just, we're reflecting have been reflecting a large amount of grant capital to be received and what we're actually going to get. But it's not going to have an adverse effect on those projects. Like, for example, the hub project. The other one that has been.
Oh, the function centre.
Function centre,
So basically, we recognise the grant as revenue. We've been unable to do that because they haven't started.
Okay.
So that's the principal issue for the ending, if you like.
There's no other questions. I shall put for acceptance the financials. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you very much. 18.1 is the waste management strategy that laid on the table from the last meeting and was amended and workshopped again. So can I ask, as in Councillor Gatehouse and Councillor Marisol Casada, are you happy to move that motion again?
Yes.
For acceptance? Yes. Knowing there's still stages of it to go, yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And is there any further discussion on the acceptance of the draft strategy?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mayor. On the, I have a couple of comments I would like to bring up. So on the last public meeting, I asked for the motion on the waste management strategy to be delayed. And while I had some concerns about the strategy itself, I had equally important concerns about the process in which our strategies are being developed and approved or rejected. So our functions as councillors, as per Local Government Act in item 20A, is to collectively develop and monitor the implementation of strategic plans and budgets, and to determine and monitor the application of policies, plans and programs for the efficient and effective provision of services and facilities. And so the process that has been followed in the development and approval of strategies that I have observed in the past 3 or so months feels like does not support councillors in discharging this duty. Some examples are we're not being involved in the process of developing the strategy, for example. Like we received the final document on the agenda for approval with no or small opportunity for feedback. Or it feels like we're being seen as an obstacle sometimes to getting the strategies approved. So like representations we received maybe are focused on trying to defend or, the strategies that are being put forward. And so when we do provide feedback, there could be a little bit more evidence of how it has been taken into consideration. And also the amount of time, so it seems like the amount of time that we have to assess the strategies is very limited. And the information that we receive could be improved, and it could be a little bit more extensive to give us a better opportunity to assess the implications and the impact of these strategies in our community and the residents and the people that we represent. So I would like to propose that we discuss in a future workshop or meeting how we can improve this process through which we develop and approve strategies so that the elected members and councillors can support this development better to have effective strategies and meet our obligations under the Act. So that's my comment about the process and my suggestions. I don't know what my fellow councillors think or feel about this. And the other thing I would like to add is that I believe that it's important that this strategy goes out for public consultation and that community concerns are addressed before it is adopted. So I would like to just ask, it says here that council resolved to adopt the Sorell Council Waste Management Strategy contained in attachment 1. And I would like to propose that or recommend that what we resolve is to release the draft for public comment. And so that then after we can bring it back for approval. Is that how this is intended? That's my question. And to all of my fellow councillors, what do you think about this?
General Manager, would you like to make a comment, please?
Well, in terms of what's intended with the recommendation is that the strategy as amended, if the recommendation goes through as put, then that becomes the strategy and we would proceed with the preparation of the tender. If the councillors want to instead have us to carry out some public consultation on it, well, that would require an amended motion, and that would have to be put by someone other than the mover and the seconder, which was moved originally by Councillor Gatehouse and seconded by Councillor Mirakasala. So as it is, if it goes through, then it becomes a strategy and we keep moving, or we do, as we discussed, an amended motion is put up. If that gets through, then we're mindful of the timing that we have to comply with in terms of the preparation of tenders. It would need to be a reasonably short period of public consultation. In other words, in the vicinity of 3 weeks, in order to meet our tendering requirements.
But to say, as I've said in the workshop, I'm not a supporter of this part. This is not a full strategy. This is only an update of the existing strategy in a very awkward time where there's a lot of things about to change in the waste industry that we're not aware of. that we're going to be going out in the next couple of years with a lot more community consultation because of the changes that will be coming up over the next 12 to 18 months in the waste industry. Even to go out now for a simple look at the strategy, most guaranteed that the enormous part of the community is not going to know, and we are not going to know how the waste strategy will change in the next 2 years. This is to get us through and tidy up a few things and to bring us closer to being able to move to some of those things that are changing, like the organics and the contained deposit, which will place us in a position, once we know how the government are bringing it in, where those things are going to position, we can go out and have a comprehensive and full discussion, not a half-hearted conversation about something that is basically getting towards being out of date in the next 18 months.
No, I think that's a very good point. I mean, we are going to be part of a much larger entity in a couple of years, and that's pretty apparent what the government's been saying. And I don't think we have full information to fill in the margins at the moment. This is general, but that's all we can do, isn't it?
Mr. President, but Councillor Reynolds.
Very good, Chair, thank you. Greg, so it's got in the strategy here, there will be controversy in the community because we're looking at changing the rubbish bin to a fortnightly collection instead of weekly.
The strategy sort of provides that as an option. It's I suppose, a recommendation that if we're going to move towards organics collection, one of the main reasons that you collect garbage weekly is because of the addressable nature of what's contained in the rubbish. So if that addressable, which may well be organics, if they're being collected, with food and organics collection service, it's hard, it's hard to justify why you need to collect, the vast majority of our garbage on a weekly basis. However, it's not definitive, that final decision, whilst this is a strategy, if that's made at the tender stage, and it would be my intention to write the tender documentation in such a way that the tenderers would be able to give us a price for doing weekly garbage collection, give us a price for doing fortnightly garbage collection, and then council can make that final decision at the tender stage. But we obviously have to have the strategy, because I've got to have a direction about what council wants to put it out to tender.
Because, I certainly agree that once we have organics, that we could potentially look at changing weekly garbage collection to fortnightly, but I don't think we can do it beforehand. And as Councillor Marisol said, that we should have consultation around that before we surprise it amongst people.
Within the strategy, we've had the communications that Greg sent and briefed us on. So we're looking at options to minimise any significant cost increase in terms of our rubbish charges to the community. So once we've tendered a range of services and tendered in a variety of ways, we'll be able to work out just what those costs are, who's able to provide that service, if anybody, particularly with respect to green waste and hard waste. And we are to make an informed decision about if we do need to provide an increased rate cost or pass on increased rate costs for garbage to ratepayers, or if we can accommodate it within the existing budget. So we're not suggesting that that's what we're going to do. It's just an option to consider, subject to the tender results that come in.
That's a strategy we're looking at, yeah. Councillor Campbell.
Through the Mayor, with Greg's timetable to be sent us to, my understanding is, if we don't get this sorted soon, we're not going to have enough time to get the tender ready, because by the looks of it, the tender briefing is like, so May, June, I think, and my belief is you need 12 months really to allow them appropriate time to get everything ready by the end of the tender process, and I don't think there's really enough time. But if we send this out for community consult to get everything ready for that time frame, so we kind of do need to really keep that in consideration when we're going to pass this, and consider that we do need to move fast if we're going to look at amending it. That's my understanding anyway.
Mayor, if I may answer that question, thank you. Yes, that is correct. The advice we've had from other councils that have gone through this sort of process, and it's not just a small tender. Apart from the street bins, we're proposing to tender, the vast majority of all of our waste services, including the ones that are the most time consuming, that involve the most sort of capital investment by contractors, and that's the garbage recycling and potentially curbside organics collection. They've got to go out and buy trucks. In the tender process, it has to be fair and equitable to all people who are tendering. So not just your existing contractor, but any other contractor that wants to put their hand up, for a multi-million-dollar tender. They've got to have the time, to be able to not just prepare the documentation, because it's not a quick process for us to write the tender documentation, but for them to actually, you have to give, if you want a decent price, you've got to give them the time, and that's not just a couple of weeks, that's a good, 4 or 5 weeks to put their tender documentation together, and then we've got to evaluate it. So, and even once you make a decision, and there's a lot of, negotiations. Clarence, I think Russell from recollection told us they spent 3 months negotiating. So after council made the decision to award them.
They spent 3 months sorting out the legals before they decided whether they were going to grant it to a tender.
So there's a point when you're a successful contractor has to go out and look at the trucks, and the market has changed. There's a much longer period than, it's recommended you have, 12 months. I mean, 6 months, what I've put down is really cutting it fine. So if you stay with the same contractor, they can potentially, adjust plan. Or in the case when Clarence changed, they went through a lot of turmoil, and Cleanaway had to bring in trucks from all around Australia and get them over on the boat just so they could actually start on that. And that wasn't new trucks, that's pulling out second-hand trucks from all around Australia to be able to meet that demand. So you run a bit of a risk if, and things get more expensive when the timeframes get a lot tighter.
Thank you.
I do have a question. One is in the Gantt chart that Greg you provided, it does mention here public comment from February and March, and it's marked here. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes,
So
that is
I was
correct.
under the understanding that what we were approving today or rejecting today, if it was approved, it was going to go to public comment, even for a short period of time, whatever the tender process allows us to. Is that correct?
Mayor, the Gantt chart that I prepared, obviously there was a lot of discussion at the last council meeting, as everyone would recall, and one of the things that was discussed at the meeting was the ability, or was whether council would or wouldn't put this strategy out for public content. So I suppose I've prepared the Gantt chart from the time period for the worst possible scenario, from a timing point of view, that if we did add a couple of months on, this is what the ramifications for the time frame would be, and if we have any hiccups, this is best case sort of scenario. But if we don't, if council resolved and I could start work more immediately, obviously those timeframes would be adjusted accordingly. But I potentially could have provided 2 Gantt charts with either scenario, but it's pretty easy just to just adjust it one way or the other, because everything else proportionately would stay the same. It's only whether you allow an extra couple of months for consultation or not.
Councillor Reid.
Brilliant, thank you. It's good to have that extra information, thank you. I keep coming back to thinking about effective change management and how important it is to involve people as early as possible so that you prevent backlash later on in the process. And we've had some significant examples of that in years gone by. And waste management always gets people interested in focused on their preferences, doesn't it? So I think we need a best of both worlds approach here, and to release the proposal in a broad sense for comment, but not for consultation. Just to, it's almost like a toe in the water, have that opportunity for some input. Whilst the expected tender documentation is being prepared, and they sort of run concurrently and achieve the desired timetable. So I think forewarned is forearmed, and that includes our community members who need to start to consider that the future is going to be different. That's my comment.
Councillor Gomez.
I have concerns if we put this out to community consultation. I don't disagree that we need to have ongoing conversations with the community. But at this point, with this strategy and this timeline, it has built-in variables. But putting the strategy out there without the appropriate education that goes with it, because there are some dramatic changes to the way our waste will be collected. The public expectation is that we have organics collection, but some people are going to struggle to get their heads around that, and the reduction may be the reduction in general waste collection. So if we go to consultation without that education parallel with it, are we going to cause panic, confusion? Are we going to get the correct sort of feedback from the community if we go for a consultation or a feedback? Yeah, and you need that length of time to get the education out there as well as the strategy.
Most things that are going to be happening with organics haven't been finalised yet, so very few people are aware of what's happening just in organics or even what organics are.
Yeah.
It's not just food scraps, so it's much more comprehensive than that. So yes, there is an education process planned right across all councils throughout the state, but it hasn't been formed up yet because that's still that grey area you're talking about. Any other comments?
In all areas of government, what I find is that people expect people they elected to make decisions for them. And if they make the wrong decisions, then after a period of time, there is the most fierce referendum of all, the election. I think all these points are right, that we're talking about things we scarcely understand, let alone what the community understand. We're not likely to frighten people. And your fear is we'll put off any kind of decision that's going to cost us more money.
Thank you. Any other comments at all?
I'll just say, because of the timing, look, I'm going to support the strategy as it is, but I think there should be a sort of a footnote somewhere that we ask for feedback. It doesn't have to be an extensive consultation process, but at that same time, there may be an opportunity to have an article in the local paper and just to explain what we do and what we're trying to achieve. And that at least we're giving people an opportunity to say something. And I would also go along with what Councillor Marisol said about having a workshop to discuss strategies in the future and how we go about it. So
I don't think there's any problems in forming up between Stacey, Greg, Russell and myself, explanatory article to go in. That'll be happening quite often over the next 6 to 12 months because as it has come through, not just pushing the new waste authority, but also contain deposit and the state waste strategy and the operation of organics. And what you have to remember too on organics is there isn't the capacity anywhere in the state at the moment to handle all the organics. There has been some federal and state funding put towards Barwicks to run an operation which they're just getting up and going at Boyer, on land provided by Boyer, but that basically only takes care of Boyer's waste and a couple of councils are doing already. There is another proposal for another organics operation that we will be involved with through COPPing hopefully coming forward in the very near future, which will give us a whole different perspective on how we can go out and talk about organics and what are organics collectible. So there'll be a lot of those sort of articles happening very quickly over the next, almost monthly for the next 6 months or longer. So that suggestion is not a problem at all and will be taken on board and done safely. With that, I shall put the motion for acceptance of the waste strategy. All those in favour? And passed unanimously, thank you. 20.1 is the stadium fees for individual and small groups. Can I have the mover, please, for this? Mr. Campbell, thank you. The seconder, Councillor Brown. And this is to fill a bit of a gap in the fees, which we sometimes need to do. You can't will be aware, but in negotiating with different groups, sometimes, no matter how much we compare our fees, there are anomalies or there are ways that we can accommodate various other community groups in utilising community facilities, and sometimes it just needs to come back for some alteration and adjustment. This is one of those cases. I would take. Is there any other discussion, Councillor Reid?
Thank you. I very pleased to see this to facilitate a broader use of the stadium, which is fantastic. 2 questions. One is, how does insurance apply in this case? Because normally hires are organisations that council requires to be insured, is that correct? And the second question is around how this might then be applied to other facilities that council manages.
Okay, I shall look right here and for a handball to go across to Jess to answer those questions, please.
We have consulted with our insurers and their people hiring this will be covered by council's public liability insurance, not the group accident insurance, which is a small risk that council takes in allowing the access of the small groups.
Can I ask just a second, because we've got management over there at the centre?
Yes, having supervision of people there does make a difference to the risk. And
the second part of the question was, might this approach extend to other council facilities in terms of a broader range of types of uses, particularly in less formal use?
it certainly could.
Councillor Campbell.
Through the Mayor, does this also extend to the like function room and things for smaller groups to meet there and hire those facilities?
No,
Just for the
only the courts.
and not so much in relation to the small charge, but just wanted to raise, and I'm not sure it might have already been addressed, but with the South, I could be wrong, South East Football Club, they did bring up at the opening about the signage, because I think are they involved in, the shared hire of it with the netball and the basketball, but they didn't have any signage, so they did query that with them as the opening and their use of it. So I was wondering if we can maybe.
Yeah, that would be the South East United Football Club. They don't have signage within the stadium because they play outside the stadium. We have offered the same type of signage to them in more visual areas for the soccer. When and if futsal gets off the ground, then we can certainly look at signage for that in.
And with the futsal, my understanding was because it's all glass on the outside, is there a future plan so that they can play futsal inside?
Yes, we received confirmation earlier today that the glass can withstand futsal competition, and that if there is an incident, then it will shatter, not.
Yeah.
Right.
It was still stay there, but the one was great, yeah.
So we've only received that confirmation this morning, so that was good news. Yes.
Councillor Campbell, we've had quite a few young members of the community test the glass from the outside.
I think they were able to break it though, weren't they?
Yes, it wasn't a foot or a metal object, but they might have done us a favour and researched it.
Thank you.
Put some sort of connotation on that sort of activity. Thank you. If there's no other questions, I'll put the motion for acceptance of the small user fees. All those in favour? Passed unanimously, thank you. And that moves us into questions from the public gallery, please. Who'd like to start off tonight? Don't know why you look around, Sharon, it's nearly always you, come on.
I'd just like to refer you back to my motion at the annual general meeting about writing a letter to Air Services. It was totally ignored at the January meeting. It was a motion, it was voted on by the gallery that it be addressed. What is happening with that, please?
Oh,
We've continued to ignore it.
through the mayor,
General Manager's got a good answer for you, Sharon, this time.
so through the mayor, we went back and checked the audio and minutes of the AGM, and the issue around the letter was certainly raised, but it didn't actually form the motion as part of that AGM. And we can provide not the footage, the audio for that, but irrespective, I've since written to the CEO of our friends at Air Services Australia, and I'm happy to provide you with a copy of that letter. So that was done only recently, so between the last council meeting and this one. So we've done that anyway, but yeah, just the way that the AGM went, through checking that audio, it didn't actually form a motion as part of that meeting.
Fair enough. I'd like a copy of that letter, please.
Yeah, happy to treat that too.
That's fine. You mentioned in this agenda local government reform. Did any of the reforms mentioned carry on to what we've experienced in the last 4 years, with extended periods of special leave with full paid allowance? Is looked at that? Is anything happening in that area?
It doesn't form part of the reform package. That comes under a different part of the code of conduct and matters that have been looked at by the Director of Local Government. There's been no other discussions on that at this stage that I'm aware of.
That seems to have gone very quiet. Are they still addressing these issues?
Yes, they are. They've probably the best way to describe it is a lot of it's laid on the table at the moment because of the potential changes coming up. So they're trying to balance the review of the Act versus the reform that they may be suggesting over the next few months. So I think we'll see both those sort of accelerate. There are still some points, I think, I've got this right, that in the legislation requirements that they're going to pull out that still need to happen. Some of it's going to be just left on the table until they see how it will be affected by the reform suggested.
If I could make a few comments onto your waste management strategies on page 123. You've mentioned that you're going to provide a recycling hub. You might not be able to answer these questions at the moment, but in doing away with curbside collection and collecting articles that are not included in the collection at this time, are you referring to articles like car vehicles or parts of cars, tyres, fridges that aren't collected, or are we still going to look at large dumping in our area?
Dumping certainly is an issue that, regardless of where it is around the world, as you focus more on separating waste streams to minimise what is going into landfill, has been a problem everywhere, and part of the legislation and the government's requirements throughout Tasmania will be to look at how they can minimise waste dumping. It's always been a problem, and I hate to say it, but I think it will always be a major issue for all councils. What is happening though is more about the container deposits separating up a certain part of the waste and taking that out of the waste stream, the organics coming out of the waste stream. Then we start to look at how we can separate up other parts of the waste. At the moment, things like hard waste collection is making us lazy for just dumping our stuff out there, and instead of thinking of what we're actually doing with that waste. It's too easy to throw it in the landfill and forget about it. Part of this will be not just reuse, but also about how we can recycle a lot of that. So you'll see a lot of discussion, and it'll accelerate. It'll take a couple of years, but as the waste levy, the fund builds up funds, we can actually develop innovative ideas on how to eliminate some of those things. It may be artists using car parts for artworks, who knows? It's still a lot of work to be done in that area, but the fact that we're now starting to talk about separating up our waste into the different categories where you can do something with it. Also, technology is changing quickly, so recycled plastics used to only be PET bottles and soft plastics and a few individual grades of plastic, not all plastic. So a lot of plastic we used to send for recycling wasn't useful, but advances in technology now can actually heat that to temperatures where the gases can be separated and then form back into usable products. So that's also changing. At the moment, we don't have any money or funds to do these things, and that's why the statewide waste levy is so important to actually give us a pot of money as a state at all levels to A, enforce, B, educate, C, start to show innovation on reuse and being able to do something with our waste stream. So you'll see an enormous amount of changes and education to all of us over the next 2 to 3 years and on.
You mentioned, you're going to do away with hard waste collection, there'll be hubs, but for pensioners that don't have a licence or don't have a car, are you going to consider them? How are they going to dispose or get their disposables to your hub?
Look, there's ways and means, and that could be different organisations doing it. This has been happening all around the world, and we'll take best practice on a lot of those things into Tassie. Tassie is one of the last states to bring a lot of these things in, so we've got to look. Our partner Jan will tell you she hates when we go away travelling, because I actually go to some of these centres and take a lot of pictures that end up back on. He always knows where I am around Australia. It's amazing what they actually do at some of these recycling centres. How it gets there is a totally separate subject that hasn't been worked out yet.
I should just, if I could just clarify that we're not proposing a recycling hub here. If through the tender process, if we're unable to find a contractor to provide a hard waste pickup or a green waste pickup, then there'll need to be alternative arrangements put in place, which would be people will be responsible to get their waste to Mornington Waste Transfer Station. The recycling hub reference in the strategy is more, we're referring to the little one out in the foyer there for small domestic items.
Sorry, I misunderstood.
No, the version, that's fine, because the version you're looking at isn't the updated version, that's where the confusion is, so.
Just one last question, Joe, you're stating that waste collection will go from weekly to fortnightly and we'll probably have to pay for 240 litre bins, is that correct? That it'll go up, or will you provide the bins free to the ratepayers, or is it only the ratepayers that agree to pay for a 240 litre bin that will get those bins?
Well, that's what we need to sort out through the tender, so it's all going to come down to what services we tender and what response we get, if any, and associated costs. So it's something that council need to make an informed decision on. If we can find someone who's going to provide hard waste collection and green waste, for argument's sake, and we still want to do their existing services and maybe add some more, then we need to work out if there needs to be an increase in waste management charge through people's rates notices or not. And one approach to minimise that might be to go to fortnightly garbage collection instead. Now, the costs of that are borne by council in terms of the bins. If there's additional bins that need to be, or replacement bins that need to be purchased, but we just work out over the life of the tender if there needs to be change to the waste management charge and people's rates. So we have to run the tender first to see who's prepared to provide the service and then at what cost, and then we can determine what's going to happen to existing services, if anything.
Because the mix of services will change as well, Sharon. So, I mean, we wouldn't go to fortnightly if FOGO wasn't in place, for instance. So we're not jumping to that without something else offsetting it, if you like. So it's that mix of services for the price that will ultimately have to go back to both council and everybody else to understand there's more of this, less of this, and the net cost is this. So it's not the same, we're not just removing a service without putting other things in, it's that mix of services that might change.
Sure, it changes dramatically from our mindset of what we put in the rubbish bin now.
Yeah.
So the cardboard and bottles simply into the recycling, but all of a sudden, on average, somewhere between 40 and 60% of our rubbish is organics. So that'll go into a separate thing, and at this point in time, I don't think organics are going to be part of the waste levy. So you actually literally halve what you're throwing out and have to pay waste. So that has a compensating effect to the overall cost of the bins. And there's no, even if it is a free bin supplied by council, it's still costing the ratepayer. So there's nothing free. It's how you minimise the cost of waste overall by being smarter in the education process about what you can take out of the costly part of it and put into the minimising part of your waste.
How
That's
are
part of
you,
that
sorry,
discussion.
how are you going to dispose of the old bins? Are you going to collect them free of charge, or is that going to become a fee on the people that own the current size bins now? Has that been brought out to it? Because it's going to be a lot of bins.
Not at my level anyway. So I'm sure there's other smarter people than me, but I'm overflowing with information on waste these days, that's not part of it yet.
Thank you.
But it makes sense if we were to hand out new bins, that we'd collect old bins at the same time. I mean, that's the way that the job would be done.
Thank you.
And they are recycled.
I'm Jeanette Gossamer. My question is going to be about the streetscaping and where it was at. And I think it was answered earlier in the evening, vision for Sorell. You've had your committee your meetings and that, when it comes out to community's conversation, I'd like to suggest that they ask if the people that attend that meeting, I know that the South East Arts, for instance, are interested in it. If you have a representative from anyone interested, considered for that, from that meeting.
Thanks, Joe. One of Jess's strong points in managing a well that community has been making sure that the new groups we have been forming have a accurate as best you can with the flexibility that the community needs of the terms of reference or direction that it has to be, and also making sure that the scope of people sitting on that committee is as broad as it can possibly be.
Yeah, I know that they're
And, I
quite
think-
on the work, I just want to.
Yeah. No, thanks for your comments, and you learn each time you put one of these groups together, and no different to the arts and cultural group where we're meeting tomorrow night, and part of that will be to redefine some of the things, or see if it needs to be redefined again, but I'm sure there'll be a broad selection, broad request for people to be part of that.
Okay, first of all, Russell, there's a little pothole at the corner of First Avenue and I think it's Carl River Road.
Yeah, I've
Same
seen,
size of dinner plate,
I've seen that.
good, so you know about it.
Traffic calming device.
There's a few around, but yes, there is one there, yes.
Okay, I didn't want to lose an accident. Now, I've been banging on for the last 5 years about bone seed and the gum trees and young Robert, what have we found out? Anything? No, I'll bang on next time then. I just sort of do worry about the size of the gum trees, particularly if the wind blows and knocks my house down. And I wonder if the council has sort of some idea of duty of care or something like that. I mean, I just need to know who owns that strip of land. Have we got anywhere with that?
Oh, it's still the same situation where the land is under control of the public trustees, so.
I don't think it is. I'm sure she told me the last time, I think it was last year when I spoke to her, she was going to get in touch with me before the November meeting, and she hasn't bothered. So I need to chase her up again. Okay. Now this is a question which I'm just curious about.
With this proposed amalgamation, what's going to happen to the existing councils? Are you guys all going to be re-elected and sort of go into one big pot with all the other groups, or what's the story?
We're happy to explain that. There is no proposal for amalgamation at the moment. It is amalgamation mergers. Everybody's thinking that's the simple way around it. It is a very broad look at overall reform of what we're responsible for, what the state government and federal government are responsible for, and boundary adjustments to form economically viable councils is just one of the options. So that hasn't come out yet. The consultation period finished this week with submissions. Sunday, thank you. And that's been put together. It's moving in a sensible time frame. They delayed it for a couple of months over because of the council elections at Christmas. So it's back on track again now. Quite a few of the public, our council staff separately, along with all council staff around the state, were able to meet with the reform board, and quite a few of the councils here also met or put submissions in, as well as the public. So that'll be collated now in the next short time period. That'll come out with some recommendations, suggestions for the last part of the process. The Minister has spoken to us. There's different ideas floating around with the politicians on how it might be implemented and how it might work for if there is any change to the boundaries on between the new and old councillor, but they're all just people's ideas at the moment with nothing set in concrete for several months to go. And it's quite a long lead-in time for any of the changes that are required because of a whole myriad of reasons. So there'll be an enormous amount of discussion on that, I'm sure, but nothing is formalised in any shape or form at this point in time.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, fine.
Thank you for addressing the acoustics. I'm looking forward to the final results. Yes. Hang on, sign language. On a slightly more concrete subject, I stood for 10-15 minutes today and watched the batch plant at Rosendale Road belch vast quantities of Portland cement into the atmosphere. Now, apparently this has been going on for some time. I've seen it before myself, and so they're making no effort whatsoever to fix that filter. And it's clear that the filter on the top of the silo is either fractured, blocked, or whatever. It isn't working. Could you put a nasty letter to whoever owns that plant to get it fixed, because it is a pollutant, and it's actually health hazard. Portland cement is not real good for you. If you go down a cafe, you won't find a Portland cement sandwich down there. But so it needs to be fixed. It's an economic waste for a start. They must be wasting money hand over fist blaming into the atmosphere. It's a cloud you wouldn't fly a plane through. Simple as that. You've probably come out the other side of it.
Russell has just very quickly made a note of that there, and Greg's doing the same down there, and they're the two main people in this organisation. That, as you well know.
I realise I'm a captive audience.
Yeah.
We'll follow that up.
It has happened before, Mike. I know it's happened all the time. Over years, actually, they just don't seem to do anything about fixing it. So,
Yeah.
they just drifts off like a grey cloud.
Thank you for that bit of information. I'm sure they'll be onto it very quickly.
Much appreciated.
If there's nobody else, can I just make it, I'd like to thank the councillors and yourself for opening the room to us and for providing the agendas so we can have a look before we come in. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. Oh, we need a few more agendas to keep going like this. Thank you. Yeah, please.
Well, it's lovely to see more people attending. Thank you for your time. We've just got a few other things to tidy up. Appreciate you coming along. Questions and input?
If there's a tap in the saloon, you get more customers.
Thank you for having us.
There's a little bar fridge in the room out there. We just get them in here. Thank you.
Ai, brincou, é ótimo.